Welcome to a new video. Today we're going to talk about iPhone as a gaming device because and versus Androids, and why Android gaming devices are not just some marketing ploy or scam or whatever. Not just basically a Samsung with shittier quality, and a lot of people think that because oh yeah, but the Snapdragon is there and the Snapdragon is there. It's the same performance, right? It's the same thing. So today we're going to explain to you why the misconception is there that the iPhone is the best gaming device. Also, why the iPhone pretty much smashes 95% of all Android phones out there, and how these other 5% in turn just absolutely smash the the iPhone. Yeah, so let's go. So when we look at this video, it basically explains the problem. Now, there are some people who will disagree or rather don't understand. And I'll explain to them, or rather to everyone, why this is a thing, right? So let's look at the video, right?
Hitting left, right,
Press.
1 plus.
Okay, so little context. He's trying to hit the guy who's just running back and forth, and with his reaction, he just tries to hit him once, right? So here we go.
First.
As you can see here, despite him having a OnePlus 7 Pro, he has 90 FPS, he doesn't really seem to be able to hit the guy. Now, he goes to his iPhone, right? And what happens? Oh, spoiler.
With the iPhone, I am able to hit my target many times, almost.
So, what's happening here? So, a lot of people don't seem to understand what's going on. I'll scroll down to the comments and, oh, it's almost like you're used to play 60 FPS and 90 FPS makes you adjust. That makes absolutely no sense. What he just wrote, it's absolutely no. I mean, if you were aiming around, you could have a point, I guess, like a slight point, even though not really. But he's just shooting based on reaction. That's all he's doing. So let's see, comparing 90 Hz to 60 Hz, you have to play second league, then you play suddenly in first league and argue that second league is better because you score 5 goals in second league on average while you only score that. This makes absolutely no sense. I do not know what the hell he's talking about. The real reason is because the iPhone are the hardware, software and hardware work together. It's a very small part, but it's also a reason of it. Apparently really happy that someone noticed. You have to adjust to 90 FPS, adjust sensitivity accordingly. Again, it's not a valid argument because he doesn't aim around. He literally just does in that test, which I just showed, just based on reaction. He just touches his screen. That's all he does. And he just makes something about it. This is just him saying that basically, oh, you're an iPhone fanboy. And you got all these things here. So let's explain what's happening. Why is he hitting so much more on iPhone? It's only 60 FPS. What's going on? So let me explain first what this whole FPS and hertz means and why it's important, right? Because he's implying that FPS means nothing, and that's an absolute fucking bullshit lie. Now with 60 FPS, right? Let's go ahead and use it. We got 60 FPS, right? 60 FPS. God damn it. FPS, right? At 60, we got 90 FPS. Now, what happens here on this one is, with the 60 FPS, your phone is basically having 60 frames per second. That means that if you have 60 frames per second versus 90 frames per second, this means that the other device has more frames than your device. Not only will the game seem more smooth, but this also means something for the server you're currently running it. Because let's say the server runs at a tick rate of 128, right? Just an example here. This means it's going to update itself 128 times a second. And this means that in 1 second, right? In basically one time, when this one refreshes, not a second, but when it refreshes one time, right? It will get maybe your first frame. However, when it then refreshes the second time, it will have to guess. It'll get no input, so it will start guessing what you're doing, right? So if you move, let's say this one is MR, which is move right? So it'll guess in this moment here where it'll say, okay, I do not know what's going on. I do not know what's going on. So I guess the second frame is going to be move right. This is what we call network buffering, right? So the server has to guess, okay, what is this guy doing? What is this guy going to, what is going to do? And then on the third frame, he gets a message, oh, he moved left. So the server has to correct for that. And because of this correction, you get all messed up sometimes. And this is also the reason why you see weird shit like you're dying behind a wall, or you barely see a guy, right? You barely see a guy on your screen. He just fucking insta-tapped you. And you're like, how the fuck? Inhuman reaction. This is all these kind of things that happen when the server basically also... this is only, this is not the sole reason, obviously. There are other factors to it. Ping also has a reason for this. But this is also one of these reasons where you amplify this effect. So the more frames you have, the less error the server will make based on what you're doing in game. So the more frames you have, the more you will not get fucked up. And the hertz thing, right? The 60 hertz versus 90 hertz, they're not related to anything, performance difference wise. It will not make any difference. But what it will do is it'll make the game more smooth, and it helps because the fact that your screen refreshes faster than the other screen, you have a split second where you actually see the guy a little faster than when he sees you. So another advantage you have. All right, so that the FPS is out of the way, so we can already establish based on this fact here that yes, FPS matter. But again, how much does it matter? It'll depend on who you're playing against. See, when you have 60 FPS versus 60 FPS, you won't really notice as much because both are the same, playing on the same FPS. However, when you play 60 FPS versus, let's say, 120 FPS or 90 FPS, you will have an unfair advantage in this, right? So let's go ahead and say, okay, so you have an unfair advantage with higher frames. But why is it, even though the server will, refresh higher and stuff like that, how come the iPhone will, that doesn't explain how the iPhone, wins. And this is what we call input delay. Now the input delay is basically everything, every action that you do to the point of where something happens on your screen. That is the input delay. Now the input delay is basically the network. I'm going to say the network plus the touch latency plus your screen refresh rate. Obviously, that also makes a difference. Obviously, I'm going to do an. Can I do an and? No, I can't. Fuck it. And S, and then again plus net. So let me explain what this does. So the network here, right? The network is, let's say, 40 milliseconds, right? And this means that you have a millisecond delay as to when you see the guy. Now let's say the guy has 0 ms. For the sake of argument, he's literally next to the server. He has no input delay. He's literally just, a LAN cable into the server. Bam. Right? Or he's hosting the server. Yeah, let's just say it. He's hosting the server. You're playing on the server. You have 40 milliseconds. So that means if he goes behind a wall, or rather he comes from behind a wall out, it'll take you 40 milliseconds to see it on your screen. So because he has a lower ping than you, which is the net one, he will already see you 40 milliseconds faster. Now the next one is the touch latency, and this basically describes how fast the phone will react to your touch. So when you touch the screen, how long does it take for the phone to actually register, aha, you touched it? Then it will send the coordinates to the processor. It'll then, say, aha, it touched at these coordinates. Please do something about it. It'll then say, okay, game, he touched there. Shoot, please. The game will then register the touch, the actual touch that you touched it, and it'll again add with the net code, and it'll just have the total result of this delay. Now let's say the delay of the iPhone is 50 milliseconds, right? And then you got the hertz and FPS, which in terms of input lag, they won't do a whole lot. Contrary to popular belief, they're not that hardcore, but they still do a little bit. So in the case of iPhone, I'm just going to give 10 milliseconds. Now, don't take these numbers literal. These are just example, right? And then you obviously got the net again, which is 40 milliseconds. So why is the net 2 times? Well, one is the delay of when you see the guy. One is the delay on when you press shoot on your screen and when the server registers, aha, he pressed the shoot button, right? So here we go. This entire thing is what we call input lag, right? So this is basically when we do an action, or rather when we see a guy, when we do an action, and then it responds to the action and shows up on basically when the server has to do it. Now, here's where the OnePlus, I'm gonna take green for this, where the OnePlus will basically completely fuck up. Actually, I'll take purple. Why not? Why not purple? Now, the problem is this. See, the thing about iPhones is, and this is very convenient because this video here, it doesn't mean all iPhones are created equal. It's not the case. This actually, ironically, means for the iPhone, the cheap ones, the one with the IPS screens. Because the IPS screens are just significantly faster than OLEDs. And because of their shitty resolution, they have 720p. It's such a crappy resolution. But because of that, their data input is so small that if you send 60 frames per second, right? Let's say, let's take here the green for the iPhone, right? So what you have to send 60 frames, right? 60 frames per second with, with a 720p resolution. The data, let's say, is just like, I don't know, it's just, I mean, I don't know. Let's just take an arbitrary number here of 1 megabyte, right? 1 megabyte per second, right? So in order for, I mean, you have the screen, it has to be processed by the chip, so it also outputs it on your monitor, on your screen, and it's relatively fast because there's not much data to work with. Now, the moment you already inherently OLED's also slower, right? Because they do different things. The IPS panels really they don't have to do a whole lot. And this is why they're downright just faster. And this is why they have such a low touch input latency compared to an OLED. Now, this also means that the iPhone 11 Pro Max and the 12 Pro Max, they're gonna be flat out worse for PUBG. It's funny because that's actually what's happening right here. So, because it's so much faster, and obviously there's also a small advantage too. This is why I said the one comment was kind of, it had some sort of point. The software on the Android is obviously more specialized, while the software on iOS, the iOS software is more specialized for the actual phone, meaning it's more optimized. While on Android, it has to support a wide range of phones, so it's not always up to date, and sometimes, especially Samsung is the best, offender here, just fucks it up entirely and just puts on a lot of bloatware, making this even worse. And it doesn't help that on the Android side, you have some severe problems sometimes with boosting clock behavior. Again, which makes the whole process even more delayed, so you have even more input lag. When we take the OnePlus, right, we have some significant delay in terms of this, and yeah, that's not great. While this one is better, it will have lower input lag in terms of, because it just on the screen it'll see things faster, and the FPS makes it so the server, sees you faster and stuff like that, so you have a slight advantage there. It just cannot cope with the huge disadvantage coming from the touchscreen input delay. That's a problem. That's actually a huge problem right there. Now, obviously, when we look at the OnePlus, so how high is this delay? Well, according to this post here, is the Mi 10 Pro touch sampling rate. Now, someone's asking, well, what's the touch sampling rate? So someone did a small test here. He took a OnePlus 7 vanilla, so it's not a Pro. It has a 180 touch sampling rate, which is really high, actually. It's higher than iPhone. And I personally tested the touch latency at 90 milliseconds. By the way, this is very easy to verify and test yourself. So, yeah, I mean, He's probably more than right on this. So he already has a touch input latency of 90 fucking milliseconds. Now, when you read some articles about the Mi 10 Pro, T Pro, it has only a touch latency of 57 milliseconds. And this is where we have, you know, the problem, right? So the Mi 10 Pro is much shorter in, you know, in touch latency. Now, I haven't looked this mobile phone yet, but I already have a suspicion it's going to be an IPS screen, isn't it? I have a suspicion. Actually, I did watch it once. IPS, yeah, big fucking shocker right there. Yeah. So, yeah. See, now this is what I'm talking about, right? This is when OLED just has, you know, the huge disadvantage of being a slower fucking display. And so, yes, basically what it boils down to is not the touch sampling rate, because the touch sampling rate just tells you how many times the screen will update per second. So 180 is 180 times per second this display will update itself to your finger inputs. That's already extremely high. When I see bullshit numbers like 720, I'm like, sure, but why? I mean, that's just so overkill. I mean, come on. that's just yeah, that's not gonna do you any good. But here again, you can see that despite the touch sampling rate being the same, the Mi 10 Pro just wins because the display is faster. And this is a similar situation with the iPhone. Because the display is fucking IPS, it's just faster. So it's better for PUBG. So, what about gaming phones? Where do gaming phones land into this? Well, you see, with the gaming phones, it's very different. And you have a lot of advantage on top of already it basically beating the iPhone in many ways. So, for instance, like let's take my ROG 3, right? Let's take my ROG 3 now. ROG 3. Now, the important part to note here is my ROG 3 has been kernel modified. So this is not a standard ROG 3. This is basically the full potential you can get out of the ROG 3 in terms of PUBG gaming and so on. So not only the boost frequency, the boost clock on this phone is basically a constant 1 gigahertz on the CPU and 782 on the GPU. Also undervolted to sustain the clock. Even at high load, it will sustain the clock without throttling. This means a lot because this means it's more responsive to whatever's happening. This already makes, I mean, I think ASUS has measured the screen at, I think, 24 millisecond touch input delay. Now, I'm gonna take this with a huge grain of salt, okay? This is very important because there are claims, I'm gonna show you this in a moment when you decide on which phone you're gonna buy, because this claim is pretty much, you know, it's very bullshitty. So don't take this as, you know, an actual value. But again, I mean, the ROG 3 has a stable boost clock, a relatively clean operating system with no bloat like Samsung usually has. For instance, has a relatively low touch input delay, so it has a relatively fast panel. It has a very relatively fast processing of the touch inputs. Now, what's really important to note here is that because of this, right, my personal ROG 3, it's very important because I cannot stretch this out enough. My personal ROG 3 on my settings will absolutely destroy any iPhone that exists. There's no iPhone will be able to outperform my phone, especially if I actually try hard to make it the delay as slow as possible. The reason for this is very simple because I made it more responsive. I made that the touch inputs are way more recognized. And basically, frames are rock stable and everything. I have the advantage of not only faster touch input, you know, way lower input delay. I also have the advantage of more frames, which in PUBG means a lot because PUBG is a game where you literally shoot faster. The bullets shoot faster because they're tied to the frames per second. Fuck me if I knew why it's like this. To me, it's just dumb. You can, I mean, come on, PUBG developers, what the hell, man? So that in itself is already really problematic. But also I can do stuff like, you know, if I really want to try hard, I just take my USB Type-C hub, hammer in a fucking gigabit Ethernet connection. Yeah, how's your Wi-Fi gonna cope with that? No Wi-Fi on the iPhone or any other phone is gonna beat a gigabit network connection. It's just not gonna happen. It's just not going to happen. You know, I could go full tryhard with this and just say, okay, here's my 120 hertz, here's my 120 FPS, because I use the I don't know, I'm gonna use the Chinese version. Then I'm gonna shove in the adapters through Ethernet. Yeah, try to beat that. You can't. There's no way. I have a huge gaming advantage. And there's obviously other advantages too. If you play, for instance, on speakers, the gaming phones have a more of an, 180 degrees, maybe 200 something degrees of actual, room emulation kind of thing. Basically, when I play on speakers, Call of Duty Mobile, I have the huge advantage that I can really hear where they're coming from. So if someone comes like slightly to the left in front of me or back of me, it doesn't matter if they're back or forth, I can hear that. I can hear, oh, he's there. I can pinpoint his location. If he plays on a normal phone or an iPhone on speakers, he will never be able to determine where the hell this is coming from. He can only hear my steps, so he has to guess. A lot of times, even on really high ranks, when I see people do that, it's hilarious because they're absolutely confused where I am. Obviously, you can, if you use actual proper headsets, you can absolutely avoid that, obviously. But if you use like in-ears that that don't really have this the full room emulation kind of thing, or using speakers, I have a huge advantage of knowing where you are, but you don't know where I am. So again, another advantage on the gaming phones. Not only, also the shoulder buttons, which are mapped to whatever action you want. Huge, a massive advantage. I can aim and shoot down sights way more natural than iPhone users ever could, unless they use some sort of third party, I think they call it a claw adapter thing, where you kind of have just shoulder buttons on it and you just put it in. But I don't personally like those, because I don't like the fact that they put pressure on my screen. It's like, it's a little scary. It's scary. I don't like. But again, you could possibly kind of get that, but I already have it built in. I have built-in shoulder buttons. So, this part will show you a little bit of marketing BS, right? Because now you know everything about this. Now you're like, oh, so the iPhones are not going to be gaming phones, or at least not the good ones. But iPhones will beat most Android phones, and that's a simple fact. This is why you have this very, very weird idea that people think that all iPhones are going to beat any Android phone, and that's simply not the case, because there's some mobile phones that are just made for gaming, and these made for gaming, they will absolutely annihilate the iPhone. So here you go. Now, let's go ahead and say, I've convinced you. You want to play PUBG competitively, you want a gaming phone, you want, the huge advantage of a gaming phone. So I'm going to show you a little bit of marketing BS. And so when we look at this, we see, boasting an industry-leading 300 hertz touch sampling rate, I'll come to this later. The 144 hertz 1 millisecond AMOLED display. Wow, 1 millisecond? That's fucking fast, isn't it? Gives you a super smooth game experience with an ultra low 24.3 millisecond touch latency. This all sounds like a wet dream, right? Well, the thing is, 3, 4. Okay, let's check those numbers out, and it'll explain everything. Okay, actual performance might vary depending on conditions. Yes, the test result provided by Asus Labs, actual performance may vary depending on conditions. AKA, they absolutely will vary on condition. You see, this is the absolute, and I mean the absolute best case condition scenario you could possibly get, right? And this is why you don't have to take these numbers very serious, because depending on application, the touch sampling rate will differ. And the reason for that is very simple, because you don't want a phone to run at a constant 300 hertz touch sampling rate. That would drain the battery for no good reason. And the touch latency, well, again, it will absolutely depend on the application used. If you, for instance, the test they did was most likely something like they have an app that measures touch latency, very simple app, and touch the screen, boom, they measure 24.3 milliseconds. The problem is, and this is why my ROG 3 is more than likely going to absolutely annihilate the ROG 5 in terms of this, is because a lot of times the touch input will very, very, very much depend on the actual, boost clock speeds and how responsive the device is. For instance, if I now play PUBG, and this happens a lot on especially higher end phones, we use a ridiculous low clock speed, like let's say 800 something megahertz. Can't write. So this is what the ROG 5 will use. For instance, let's say on PUBG, PUBG 90 hertz, 90 FPS, right? 90 FPS, low. Right? Horrible text, right? So it will only use this. And the problem with this is also it kind of goes into a low battery mode kind of thing, and immediately you have a problem because the touch sampling rate, even though it's high, it will just take a longer time to actually process it because it's like, yeah, it's fine. Oh, he's touching it. And this is also something you see a lot happening with people complaining about PUBG. They see 60 FPS, but the game seems laggy. And the reason for this is because the boosting behavior is just dumb. It's retarded. Asus, I mean, don't expect Asus to fix this, ever. The ROG 2 has it, the ROG 3 has it, the ROG 5 has it. I literally had to make a custom kernel in order to fix this. That's how retarded it is. It's just dumb. I do not know why. I honestly, for a gaming phone, I just do not understand why it's still going on, like why it still focuses so much on battery, especially when doing games. I mean, come on, man. Come on, Asus. That's just dumb. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is, actually not the last thing, this is going to be the second last thing, and that is the 1 millisecond touch delay. I mean, you see this here, 1 millisecond touch AMOLED touch delay. Now, this is something, it also happens on gaming monitors, and it's annoying, because we never know what the actual, input, like the actual input delay is. When they say 1 millisecond AMOLED display, they say if we use extremely unrealistic settings that will make your screen unusable, we can achieve 1 millisecond. That's literally what they're saying. Here, perfect example, right? So I'm gonna give a little context here because you probably don't know what to exactly expect for them. So this is the LG 27GL 850. This is one of the fastest IPS monitors that exist, right? On default, it actually has an average gray-to-gray response time of, 5.88, worst being, 8.35. And that's pretty fast. That's pretty fast. So 6 milliseconds, but that's nowhere near the 1 millisecond. So how do they actually achieve this? Well, they will use something called overdrive mode. What the overdrive mode will do is, well, I mean, without getting too technical, it basically makes your screen slightly worse in picture quality and gives you blur, which is called ghosting, in order to somehow make them monitor a little faster. Depending on the error, I mean, the average error being, 2.5%, that's you won't really notice it. You won't notice it. So here, overdrive mode, fast, super, it's nice. Thumbs up. This is still really, really nice. So the average gray to gray is 4 milliseconds. The best one is 2.26 milliseconds. Now, what would it take to actually reach this 1 millisecond? So yeah, if we have the average gray to gray, it will be 1.72 milliseconds. But technically, I mean, the best one it could do is 0.25 milliseconds. I mean, come on, wow. But as you can see here, the overshoot and undershoot, which basically means you have massive ghosting. The monitor would be absolutely fucking unusable. This is the overdrive mode faster. I believe this is the fastest mode you can put in the LG mode. You don't ever want to use monitor, but technically it could run 1 millisecond. And because of this, they just put it like, okay, 1 millisecond. Because technically you could run it like this, right? You could totally do it if you wanted to, but it has no practical use. And this is what the whole 1 millisecond bullshit means. If you read 1 millisecond, just ignore it completely. You have to look at other reviews that actually, like unbox, like hardware unboxed, to actually, go more into depth, like actual does measure it. Yeah, I mean, 1 millisecond AMOLED is, we all know that's not the case. Whatever, I mean, I suspect it's probably slower. I mean, considering it's a Samsung E4 display, so it's probably way slower than 1 millisecond. Yeah, I mean, Samsung phones don't really focus that much on speed. They focus more on image quality, I guess. So I'm not sure about the actual input delay on the screen, but it's probably higher than the ROG 3. That's what I assume. Because the ROG 2 and ROG 3 display, they're actually meant for gaming, I guess. They're built for it. So I assume they will be faster. When I play Call of Duty, I always feel that I have a huge advantage. But then again, I play 120 FPS. And with my boosting behavior, I mean, I probably have a massive advantage in just shitting on them. Yay, me. So yeah. Another thing, this is the last thing I want to talk about, is the whole 144 hertz. I mean, yes, 144 hertz. Oh. Don't ever use this mod on a Rock 3. This is something I'm going to say right off the bat. Don't use this on Rock 3, because it basically introduces a lot of problems. Now, the display obviously has been made for, at max, 120 hertz. Why do I say this? Well, the thing is, look, you can overclock, let's say, a Redmi screen, right? There's a 60 hertz screen. People have started overclocking Redmi screens, and some achieve up to 80 hertz, others just around 70. So when do they notice this is stop? This is basically when it's not gonna do anymore. Well, the thing is, once they hit a certain limit, they will notice how they get something called ghost touch. Now, this refers to something where you touch a screen, but it doesn't react to it. This is something that only happens if your display bandwidth, because your display and your the actual display and your touchscreen share one connector. So if the display is oversaturating the entire connection, obviously then suddenly the touch inputs will not be registered. And this happened on the Rock. This actually happens on the Rock 3 when you use 144 hertz mode. I used 144 hertz on Wild Rift, Call of Duty Mobile, and I noticed these ghost touch happening here and there, and it was super fucking annoying. Once I put it to 120 hertz, guess what? Never happened again. Because, well, as already noticed with the Redmi phones, which when you overclock the screen, the exact same behavior, this is what happens. So when you see 144 hertz and you notice that you get ghosting, that means the screen really doesn't. So why do I even mention this, right? Chance of you having a Rock 3 probably isn't that high. Well, first of all, I have a community where people actually have a Rock 3, so this will be very interesting for them. But overall, as far as I know, this is a Samsung panel, and it's probably made for 120 hertz. This is where I, it's possible, okay? I mean, it won't be bad, but it will happen at times, and it's super frustrating when it happens, okay? So maybe you want to set your game to 120 hertz instead, or 90 hertz, whatever. I'm not sure about this panel. I haven't tested it yet. I am absolutely not interested in Rock 5 due to a lot of other concerns, mainly durability-wise, and I'm not talking about it being easily to break in terms of physical. I'm talking about actual electrical, like motherboard design issues, where I am super scared that the phone won't even last a year. So yes, I kind of have a video on that, even though now there are more shit coming up to the Rock 5. So basically, my personal recommendation, if you're looking into the perfect PUBG mobile device, absolutely go for Black Shark 4 Pro. It's by far the best. It has actual shoulder buttons, not this capacitive thing that the Rock has. I mean, it works mostly, but it's still not optimal. Sometimes it's like some rare situations, it just won't really notice my fingers. I'm like, fuck. Or you slide a little too much, and again, it's like, it's. I mean, it works. It works. It's nice to use, but there's some rare cases where it's like a little, if only I had actual shoulder buttons. The Black Shark 4 has you covered. Also, really ridiculously fast display. They focused a lot on the input lag there. They have a top measurement of, I think, 8.7 ms delay, touch latency delay, which again, take the number with a huge grain of salt, or rather with a salt bucket. But I'm more than certain that it will absolutely beat the Rock 5, for instance, in terms of touch latency delay testing. I'm very certain that it will. And this is not just because it has a higher touch sampling rate. No, it's because, of the actual way of the flash display. This is also why it doesn't look quite as nice as the Rock 5, because it's just focused. It's absolutely focused on speed rather than, display looks. So again, Rock 5, very questionable decision there. So yeah. Otherwise, if you can't get a Black Shark, I would say Red Magic 6 again. Wasn't this thing with an Red Magic 6? Wasn't this around with it was also IPS, wasn't it? No, it's AMOLED. Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't run it on this, to be honest. Again, the Red Magic 6 is also a fine-ish phone. I mean, I would still recommend it, even though you have to live with the fact that you kind of are reliant on third-party developers to basically fix the phone, because as far as I know, software support on Red Magic 6, it's not exactly great. It's not great. Again, Black Shark has basically everything ticked off in the box in terms of software support, hardware, how it's built, features, has the best speakers in a smartphone, period, which has been tested by DxO Mark. Yeah, it's all these, things that make the Xiaomi best choice. Now, something regarding to the iPhone, again, this is something really, really important. Now, a lot of people apparently have the idea that, oh yeah, iPhone is gonna fix the thermal throttling. No, they're not. I legitimately don't care what you think. It's not gonna happen. This is a hardware problem. Look, the cooling on the iPhones will never, ever cope with when the chip is running at a higher power draw. It's just not going to. No amount of updating the software is ever gonna fix it. Genshin Impact will always lag on, like it will always thermal throttle on a phone. Playing Dolphin 4K demanding game, it will always cause the fucking screen to dim and the phone will thermal throttle. You have to live with it. It's just what it is. The iPhone is not meant to run at high performance ever. It's just not meant for it. It's a terrible, terrible casual gaming phone, because a lot of casuals, or even maybe hardcore RPG guys, I mean, I see a lot of games out there lately that really come with good graphics and have some demands on terms of specs. None of these games will ever run good on an iPhone. It's just not gonna happen. Then you're better off with a higher spec Android phone, I guess. Because then the touch input, the touch in latency and all this kind of things, they don't matter. They really don't matter. All these things I just explained matter only if you play PUBG, maybe the new upcoming Apex Legends for mobile, Fortnite and Call of Duty Mobile, these competitive games. That's when all this thing I talked about matters. Once you play like Genshin Impact or anything like that, yeah, it doesn't matter anymore. That's when you just take, look how much it thermal throttles, because if it's not a gaming phone, it'll probably thermal throttle to some degree, and compared to the iPhone for all I care. But yeah, don't even think for a moment, not even for a split second, that an iPhone is ever going to run, or the current generation of iPhone. You never know. Maybe they will finally make some beast. I doubt it though, considering how mediocre iPhones generally are in terms of basically everything. It's funny because the fact that iPhones were so low spec kind of worked in favor of it being a superior PUBG device versus most Android phones, which is hilarious because the display is basically so shitty that the data output is so small because of the shitty resolution and just rather low image quality. It's just like, oh yeah, because of that it's just faster. Yeah, fuck it. So this is also why you see competitive gamers like me. I play very competitively PC games. I play CS:GO on 4x3 resolution stretched. Everything low, it looks like fucking hot potato garbage, but hey, I have high frames. I hit people. That's all I care about. The same with Valorant. Everything low except for textures high. Rest is fucking low, and sharpness obviously a little bit more. The game doesn't look perfect by any means, but hey, I have an advantage because my frames are stable and everything like that. So yeah, I mean, as far as competitive gamers are, like more competitive players are as they're concerned, the iPhone is one of the better devices. Obviously, it will still not beat gaming phones, as already mentioned. And for those who obviously want to play a wide variety of games, like they want to play PUBG, they want to play Genshin Impact, they want to play basically everything. iPhone is an absolute no. The thermal throttle is a massive problem, and for those who obviously do emulation, iPhone is a terrible idea there. Absolutely terrible idea. Unless you want to play on really low resolution, you could probably get away with 480p, maybe 720p based on title, but anything above that, I mean, that it gets really iffy. It gets really, really, really iffy. I wouldn't recommend it. So don't go and buy an iPhone because someone tells you it's good for gaming. It's only good for PUBG and all these games that have low requirements, that basically are potato games. So please keep that in mind when you want to buy a phone for gaming. I think I covered everything. I hope this gave you a lot of insight to basically everything as to why it's I mean, generally accepted the iPhone is better in PUBG than phones, even though it's not true. Obviously, the gaming phones will beat them, but if you compare it to basically every mainstream phone that exists, yeah, the iPhone is simply better. I mean, the OnePlus is not going to beat it. The Xiaomi lineup, which are currently getting popular, is not going to beat it. The Huawei is not going to beat it. None of these phones are going to beat the iPhone because they simply, at least when we talk about the IPS screens, obviously when we talk about the iPhone 12 Pro Max or 11 Pro Max, which had the OLED one, that's where it's not as cut and dry anymore. I'm willing to bet that's where it's kind of getting really, it's going to get iffy. When we look at the IPS ones, I mean, they're just, what are you going to do about it? It's just faster. What you gonna do? This is also why, hilariously enough, budget phones that use IPS screens, they're also better PUBG devices than high-end Samsung Galaxy OLED devices. This is also a little hilarious fun fact, by the way. So yeah, that should cover everything. Hope you learned something. Until next.